Okay, well, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Simplifying the Complexity of Inbound Cross-Border Payments. This is Brian from Strategic Treasury, and we're pleased you could join us as we discuss how to better manage inbound cross-border payments. Our speakers for today are Greg Leven, Senior Vice President, International Business at Flywire, and Craig Jeffrey, Founder and Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Greg and Craig, and I'll now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you so much, Brian, and welcome everyone. Thanks for spending some time with Greg and I as we talk through this really interesting section. Greg, it's good to present with you. I think this is our first webinar. I know we've known each other for a long time, but really excited about today's discussion.
Yeah, nice to join the chat with y'all today. And Craig, been a fan of yours and Strategic Treasury for many years at various companies, and we've had a lot of fun at AFPs over the years. And just a quick comment: I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, and see Springfield, Missouri in the chat, and also St. Louis. So hello, fellow Missourians. I also saw an Iowa City in there, so a big game with Caitlin Clark here on Saturday. So used to live in Iowa for 3 years, and big fan of what she's doing, and hopefully Iowa City, that means you're an Iowa fan, maybe not. But welcome everyone. Looking forward to having a fun chat and hopefully be differentiated today than what you've heard in the past.
Yeah, it is March Madness, end of the quarter, but and there's a lot of things you could be doing. We appreciate you spending some time with us. And yeah, well, let's get started. So our agenda is up on the screen today. You can see the 6 rectangles, the boxes that we have. We'll begin really briefly on the global economy. There's significant value for companies as they expand globally. Globalization matters because the globe is huge. There's a large economic benefit from doing that. And it seems easy, but there is significant complexity in working across the globe. And that's really a key component of how do we simplify that complexity. That usually requires we understand that complexity, which is our second point. We'll look at it across various areas. That includes systems, payments, banks. How do we handle the interaction of business? And then we'll dive down a little more in detail into departmental concerns. Think about everybody who's involved in a business transaction, from sales to procurement to credit to treasury to AP to accounts receivable. All of these areas have some impact or are impacted across the idea of handling inbound cross-border payments. Then we'll look at practical ways of reducing that complexity. And we'll look at that complexity from several different lenses. One will be more the treasurer lens, focus on liquidity. Then we'll look at other lenses from perhaps the general finance and operational side of cost and efficiency. That's the ability to scale and to do so efficiently. Then we'll also examine it briefly on the impact to the counterparty, to the other customer, if you will. And then I've asked Greg to go through a use case as we think about practical matters and concerns. I asked him to put in a use case where there's complexity and then ways of leveraging, simplifying factors, functions to bring that home practically. And then we'll end up with some key takeaways. Key takeaways, we'll touch on what's the vision for simplification, how we handle complexity, and what are some of the next steps. So that's our agenda. We've got a lot to go on from that. So you can see a map of the globe with colorful color coding here, largely by continent, but there's some other different breaks that have been put in for just how we looked at it. And this is really just to take a look and make the comment that globally the economy is a little over 104 trillion US dollar equivalent. That's a pretty big economy. The US is about 27 trillion, so right around a quarter of it. But you can see it broken out by geographies of the size. And so this is where it seems there's a massive opportunity. There's about 8 billion people. There's a $104 trillion existing economy. And that seems great. But if you notice all those little lines on the screen, those are different countries, different jurisdictions, different in-country payment systems, many different currencies. There's a lot of complexity mixed in with this opportunity. And Greg, I'll invite you to jump into. I know this is just a pretty visual graphic, but thought you might have any comments here. Be good to hear.
Yeah, certainly is pretty. So kudos for whoever on the marketing side put this together. But no, I trust that in every boardroom all over the world, there's a chart or a graph or map like this of, what is our TAM? What is our total addressable market? And it's super easy to get excited about the opportunities in countries. And so from a payment perspective, I think maybe food for thought here, and I'll tee this up and we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth later. But there's so many considerations that says, okay, let's expand to X country. There's tax implications you've got to figure out. You've got to figure out how you're supposed to be registered. Should we put people in country initially, or can we get away with not putting someone there right away? And through all of that madness, complexity, and different systems and different organizational structures, companies really tend to forget about arguably the most important part of the entire journey of the expansion effort, which is how do I collect revenue or payments from a country once we are established? So I think, when I look at this chart, Craig, from a Flywire perspective, I think, hey, let's start with the end in mind, which the end could be is towards the end, which is, all right, let's expand and collect revenue from the country. So that's what I see when I see this chart.
No, that's good. I know the marketing people are like, how do I sell here? And then you're how do we get paid efficiently?
Yes.
Those are awesome points. So yeah, excellent. We will jump right to our first poll question. That's a double stacked poll question. The first one is our status of global payments is that we make payments in 11 or more countries, 5 to 10 countries, 2 to 4 countries, 1 country only. This is select one. And then the second option is we plan to add payments to more countries in the new year. The answers are yes, no, or unsure. So select one choice for each of these and hit submit. And that way we'll be able to see across the board how many people are dealing with this, what level of complexity. And in the chat box, a lot of people are typing the word poll, which is great. You can type the word Flywire or poll, and we will share the poll results after the webinar when those are released within 5 business days. So let's just say if there's 100 people who type the word Flywire or poll, we'll send all those results out to everyone, even if you didn't type in Flywire or poll. We'll give everybody a few more moments. And just so everyone knows, if you type them all in the first time, I won't keep bothering you about those in the chat box. And then Brian's counting process will be quicker. We like to keep him busy while we're talking. All right, Greg, the results are up. Yeah, I think this, for a company that handles payments and the complexity of payments globally, more than one country is 81% of the audience, which is pretty cool. And so we're at 41% are in 1 to 4 countries, and 51% are in 10 to 11. Pretty complex, and more than half of those who know that either yes or no's are planning to add more payments to more countries, or more collections to more countries in that mix. Any thoughts on just what this may mean generally, or your view on ongoing complexity of expansion and globalization?
Yeah, well, I think first rule of public speaking is know your audience, and definitely confirm from this statistic and poll that this audience is definitely receptive to our topic today, Craig, which is collecting inbound payments. So certainly not a surprise with global treasurers that are on this call today. We did a recent survey of 300 CFOs, and about 40% of companies are looking to expand internationally as a top priority in the next 12 to 18 months. That could mean the first time they expand internationally. It could mean adding more countries. And so what is surprising to me is actually the second statistic, which is adding more payments to countries. So we are finding this more and more where companies are prioritizing the payment side of the equation and really, focusing in on creating a great customer end-to-end experience. And I know I'm getting to my next slide, so I'll be quiet, but certainly fruitful insights, and will help us guide the discussion and speak to the audience today.
Yeah, there's some really good points there. Yeah, and I guess it's a little bit selective, right? You're going to attend a webinar on simplifying the complexity of inbound payments. It's not going to be focused on those who aren't expanding and are only in one country. I guess that's pretty logical. Yeah, so I'll touch on a couple items on the left-hand side, and then let you do the heavy lifting on the three on the right, Greg.
Sure.
Globalization, the idea that there's greater expanse of geography. Goods have to travel farther. There might be different rules, governance rules. You're dealing with different currencies, different banks, different operating parameters. And even when you deal with the same bank, sometimes you're dealing with multiple banks that just have the same name at the front of them. And so the delay factor, time to ship goods takes a long time. All those factors add to complexity. Despite the attractiveness, complexity is a real issue. We already touched on some of the complexities on companies, but there's a list there of ordering systems, billing systems, shipping systems, handling FX. All of those activities add to the complexity of cross-border payments. I think most of those are, foundational understanding elements for anybody who's in, sales, receivables, even if you're in the AP area. And certainly Treasury has to be mindful of these items as well. But that's not all. So, Greg, I'll let you jump in.
And just to comment on the company, I know I'm supposed to take the three on the right, but let me comment on company if I can really quick. I think, the adage of, hey, we've got multiple systems and how do all the systems talk to each other? I think that's a very relevant but very talked about topic. I think, the observation is what we do at Flywire is really try to understand where a company is in their digital transformation journey with those systems. Are you a company that is graduating from a very, I don't want to name names, but a very non-sophisticated ERP system or accounting system, and you're kind of making that first big investment into an ERP? You're going to have a very different view on how to go forward than a company that's had a big ERP for a decade and has had to augment some of the existing solutions in that ERP. And now you might be on the other end of the equation, which you have 20 different software systems that are supposed to be augmenting the ERP. And now you're in a state of, gosh, why do we have all of these? Can we go from 30 to 20? Can we go from 20 to 10? And so I think the important part is most companies have a lot of systems, but where are you at? What is the approach and what is the strategy from a system perspective in that digital transformation journey? Or when you hear digital transformation, do you throw up, which is also a reaction in several industries. So that's that comment. From a payment perspective, I think the word payment, we have a lot of fun with this. It's subjective. If you walk down the street in New York and you ask 10 people what a payment is, you're probably going to get 9, maybe even 10 different answers of what a payment is. So I think, consumers in our consumer life, payments and the friction with payments has seemingly made massive progress. You think about the difference between taking a taxi in 1995 versus an Uber today. The payment experience on the Uber side is awesome. You just get out of the car and you have all the data, you know exactly what the trip was for, versus the taxi back in the day. A lot of times, you're in a busy city and you're trying to get out of the taxi in a safe method. And then, my goodness, you ask to pay with a credit card and it's like you made a very brash statement to them. And then you ask for a receipt and it's like, holy moly, that's another equation. So, what the parallel there is payments do happen in our consumer world, but in a B2B environment, payments don't just happen, especially from a cross-border perspective. And so, the growing trend here is that, to tie the payments and customers together, there is we do want to work with customers to drive payment methods, to understand, hey, if we offered a different payment method in a different currency, how does that benefit our organization and also our customers? And so just, massive complexity as you grow at your organization all over the world. And then last but not least, you get to the kind of the bottom right, which is banking. And I want to encourage the audience today that kind of get away from, especially as you're expanding internationally, the old adage of if all you have is a hammer, everything becomes a nail. And so there are a lot of innovative ways to partner with banks, to fintechs and banks to actually, get a screwdriver in the mix and not just have a hammer and expect it to be a nail, so to speak. So for all my flymates out there, there's your analogy for the day. I promised them at least 3 analogies on this call, so I'm already at my quota. But no, I think Craig, just massive complexity. I think it's here, and hopefully today we can give a couple of tricks, tips, ideas to help accelerate that and reduce the complexity. So it doesn't just stop there. This is departmental implications. I can't tell you how many times, Craig, I've been at working with large organizations, and we finally tie the departments together. And not only am I meeting people for the first time, but actually they're meeting each other for the first time. And I'm just scratching my head like, man, how is this going to work if they don't even know each other? How are we going to roll this program out? So, from a payment perspective, I mean, this is a very serious topic. We're helping companies collect revenue, which arguably is one of the most important things that an organization can do. And so it's not just siloed in treasury, who are traditionally focused on FX risk, own the bank relationships. It's also the AR folks, the collections folks. How do I apply this cash, right? How do I work with treasury to apply? How can I, focus on more strategic activities rather than tactical items? One of the huge departments that we work with is actually fellow salespeople that are trying to expand revenue in a certain country. And there's this inherent friction between sales, credit, collections, billing, and finance. And from a sales perspective, all they want to do is go out and hit their number and report to the street if you're a publicly traded company and say, hey, we did great expanding, we hit revenue targets. And if they have this lingering, friction of activities, administrative activities, with just trying to simply get paid from the customers, it's a huge area of concern that's often it's an oversight that we see. And then last but certainly not least, I've never engaged with an organization that says, great, yeah, we have 15 IT people that are just waiting for another project to do, and this is perfectly timing. It's always a fight for resources. And so to tie this one all together, Craig, from a departmental perspective, it's successful if an organization can get all 3 of these departments, and maybe there's more, working together to create a business case to help drive a collective project that benefits all 3 departments, and actually prioritize the ROI with the departments to get the IT folks to do integration. So any comments there, Craig? I know you work with large organizations and across many departments.
Yeah, I like everything you said, particularly when you mentioned IT and the competition for resources and how backlogged they are. Some of our surveys show it's either IT or the priority of management that is one of the biggest impediments. There's too many things on IT's plate that slow things down, or management has certain priorities, and so getting those on the same page are crucial. They kind of go back and forth between not who's more distracted, but who has their plate filled up. But yeah, these are related groups, related areas, so a lot of implications. Now this brings us to our second poll question. This one is a select all that apply. You can tell by the rounded squares. We use the following payment types. Now I know there's a lot of people from all over the globe. ACH, treat ACH if you're outside the US as a low value payment process that's in country, and wires, in country, high value payment system for wires. Same day ACH is, more of a faster payment method. And there's virtual cards, real-time payments, other non-bank payment methods like Zelle and PayPal that tend towards the consumer side. We put faster payments to the UK or other countries' immediate payment schemes, and then none of the above. So which ones are being used? I'd love to see what the percentage is of those that are on the webinar, how much these are covered and being used. Now, while that's going on, there was Brian said we needed 25 more. It looks like we need about 17 more. So if 17 more people type the word Flywire into the chat box, not to the Q&A box, not to the other messaging screen, but to the chat box, we'll be able to see it. I know we do count the Q&A posts that way, but that's always more challenging. So looks like Flywire is making it in there. And so, yeah, that other term that you used, flymates, I guess that's how you refer to people at Flywire as flymates. That's pretty interesting. A new example. You know, Greg, the top two, low value and high value payments, that's pretty much universal. We're 95% plus. We look at some of the real-time payments, that's a specific type. But if we look at other countries, faster payments methods or immediate payment schemes, faster payments in the UK, real-time payments, pretty reasonable amount of use, I would say, across the board. I don't know if you had any comments about how companies usually have to accept lots of different payment methods to be, to support what their customers want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a payment perspective, I mean, we've got 1,200 payment methods in Flywire, so this list could be very long, especially with the alternative payment methods, but per country. But no, I just think, constantly as you're exploring payment types, the saying or phrasing that I think of is the juice worth the squeeze? No doubt, if you have a big customer in X country that's asking to pay a certain way, you're probably going to find, as an organization, find a way to accommodate it. If you have, 3 smaller customers in a particular region that have asked for a payment method, it could be harder to dedicate resources and go accommodate that ask. And so, I think very indicative of probably your audience, Craig, on the treasury side from ACH and a wire perspective. From a card, I used to work at MasterCard, and we always used to say there's 125 trillion exchange between businesses every year. Only about 25 trillion of that is on a card. Only, right? Still a huge number, but is cardable or on a card. And so I think, what I'd love to kind of have a sub poll. I'm making up my own polls on your webinar, Craig, but on our webinar. But what I'd love to see is like a breakdown of industry, right? Like the virtual card side, 38%. Is that a particular industry? Is it software? What is the use case for each one of these? But no doubt there's a lot of payment methods, and it's exhausting to try to understand the regulation around each one, the commercials around each one. What does it cost to expand the payment methods? So fun list to look at, and I'm a data geek, so could look at that list for a long time.
Well, we'll have to talk about some of our surveys where we can get into really in depth on the poll questions, expand them in a survey. So. Cool. Yeah, there's limitations on the webinar platform, but it's like, yeah, the first question you ask is like, that's interesting. Then everyone has 3 more questions on it. It's great. But yeah, we're going to jump into reducing complexity. We'll go more macro down to, individual steps to this move towards simplicity. I'll start on the left-hand side, effective liquidity management. Whether you're receiving or whether you're paying, this idea and this perspective, having visibility into when am I going to get paid, where, what currency, so that I have a clear view of it, that matters. I also want to get paid on time, not just know when, but have the right time. And, all of those are driving organizations to focus on forecasting. That's usually one of the top areas of focus. It takes the most time. It's also an area that people would put more time into if they could. They plan to spend money to manage that. And so that's a key treasury thing, but that also impacts AR and even AP and other areas to manage their liquidity effectively. The terms are different depending on the type of organization and the size of organization, but that's crucial. On the left-hand side, on the lower part, the low total cost, complexity drives costs, and we have to have operational efficiency particularly in our financial areas to sell, to collect, to pay efficiently. And so when we deal with complexity forces us to a greater overhead and lower levels of efficiency. So we need strategy, tools, partners to make sure that we have that ability to scale, to have a low total cost across the board. And in a webinar that's discussing inbound payments, payments that are coming in, cross-border inbound payments, this is a lot more challenging due to the level of complexity.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, on the foreign exchange side, the assumption in the industry that we come across a bunch is, gosh, if I change the way that my customers are paying, or I change the currency that they're required to pay in, all of a sudden I'm automatically, as an organization, as a treasurer, accounts receivable professional, all of a sudden I'm exposed to some sort of foreign exchange risk, or I've got to go through this massive ERP change to accommodate that. Simply not true. Definitely the industry standard for sure is that thinking, but it doesn't mean that if you are offering flexibility in how customers pay in a method or a currency, that does not mean that you're automatically increasing your FX exposure. So cliffhanger there, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But I think the fun thing on this slide for me, from my perspective, is reducing complexity for you and your customers. The your customers piece. That's nuanced to a lot of organizations where they're just focused on how can it be more efficient for my company. And so a real win in rolling out global payments projects is that you have a double-sided value prop to you and your customers. So those projects tend to get done a lot quicker than hey, this just helps my department and my area. So increasing operational efficiencies again is it has to start with across departments. How can we do this together with our customers? So all customers, customers are demanding flexibility. And so happy customers create referrals, create more revenue to a business. And, if you give them that choice and freedom on how they're paying, access to where the payment is, I think one of the things I forgot to mention earlier, Craig, is there's really 3 questions on every business's mind every day, which is, when will I be paid? Where is my payment? And then what have I been paid for? And if any of those questions are hard to answer because the data associated with that transaction, invoice number, customer number, item number, if that data is aside or adjacent or not traveling with the actual money movement, there's always going to be friction in those questions that you can't answer correctly. So, or in real time. So, happy customers, visibility into the data, whereas the payment is something that really reduces the complexity with the organization for sure.
Yeah, with a faster payment but slower information kind of defeats a huge part of the purpose. Yeah, thanks for your comments. There's a Q&A question about what is the faster payments UK method? That's pretty involved, but it's I don't know where the person's coming from, but if you're in the US, it would be more like RTP. I would say the UK is ahead of the US if that's where you're based, in allowing for kind of this one of the immediate payment types in the UK, so in-country payment type. So thanks for that question. So on eliminating steps, Greg asked a couple of what were some of the key questions that people are asking. Here are some other questions. What exists for me to collect funds? What do I have to do? What do I have to build internally? And can I make my default position simpler? And the default position is how do we go in and manage this collection activity, or the inbound payment side, as we look across jurisdictions with different regulations, new payment types coming on board, our ability to scale, the level of complexities. We start to say I'm in, instead of 2 countries, I'm in 8 countries or 15 countries. I have 2, 5, 10 back-end systems. Now I'm dealing with multiple banks. All of those add to this compounding complexity. So what exists? What works for my customers? Should I build something? Should I partner? Should I use technology partners to help reduce the complexity? What helps me? What helps our organization expand at a strategic level and at a tactical level? How do I make the incremental growth or the significant scale of complexity that comes as we add countries, payment types, banks? How can I make it so that it's not, my level of work doesn't scale up as quickly as the overall complexity comes up? And part of that goes down to some of the steps, some of the tactical and operational steps. I'll let Greg handle the heavy lifting in the big rectangle.
Yeah, the big rectangle can be smaller than that rectangle. It can also be larger than this rectangle. But again, like, I think back to the phrasing of, the term payments is a subjective term. And I think, if you've never rolled out a payment program before, either domestically or internationally, it's hard to figure out what the steps actually are. And so these are a couple of the common ones that we come across that are definitely things that are to put into consideration. So the number one from a treasury perspective is, if you're expanding in a country, treasurers will default to say, I need a bank account there. Do you? I don't know that. Are you collecting and remitting payments in country? Are you collecting just to move the money back to a settlement account at HQ? Do you actually have to do that? Eliminating steps, again, not treasury audience, but payment inquiries. Every time accounts receivable person receives that, or a salesperson receives, hey, where is the payment? Have you actually received it? There's this business churn that's a downstream effect. And again, if the organizations of the departments aren't speaking together and trying to solve the issue together, it depends, it increases the complexity, and we're kind of back to where we are. The two in the top right, PCI and chargeback refund management. No doubt there's people, maybe half of the audience on this call, that say, hey, those two are not my problem, right? That's a different side of the organization. But PCI compliance is a big thing to undertake. It's a big thing to keep up with. PCI 4.0 just came out. And then chargebacks and refunds, that could be a completely different system and a different environment with a different group. So, these are just some of the steps that it's worth looking into as it pertains to your specific payment project and your specific company. But yeah, again, this could be reduced to 3, or it could be expanded to probably 100. I don't know. But a couple tips and tricks there. And yeah, so kind of the before and after slide, so to speak, getting back to the business that you're in. A lot of companies that we speak to that have expanded rapidly, they might have gone all the way to hiring internal payment experts to build out how they collect funds all over the world. And I was at a international franchise conference recently, and there was a fitness franchise that was expanding rapidly, and this gentleman was explaining his business, and I paused him and I said, "Gosh, you're a payments company." No, we're a fitness company. Based on what you just described, it seems like the focus is all about payments and not selling new fitness franchises. And it was kind of an interesting, fun conversation that carried on for several discussions after that. So, the top left there is the historical view is you're waiting till the customer is ready to pay before even talking about payment, and starts with contracting and the procurement process. Hey, payments will just happen, right? We're an American company. It's an honor for them to pay us in US dollars, so it's just going to happen. I think that's a historical view, and I think I would challenge all of you to challenge your organizations to go to the right side of the screen, which is let's start talking about the payment at the beginning of the contract, of the beginning of the engagement. How are we actually going to get paid efficiently, cost effective in this relationship? And then back or down the bottom, you don't accidentally become a payments company. There are many experts. It's a super cool space. I've been in it for about 15 years. I love it. It's ever changing. But gosh, if your job is to manufacture a good and distribute it globally, focus on that, not how do I get payments out of X country, and just really simplify the reconciliation of that payment. So those are the two that I'll leave you here with today. Is just start with the end in mind, which the end could be the payment collection, and then don't get too wild in the understanding the payment systems and all the different rules and regulation, because it changes constantly. So, any comments there, Craig?
Well, when you were talking to the fitness company, and you said it was a fun conversation, I was wondering, was that a fun conversation for you because you're helping him learn, or was that a fun but challenging conversation for him because it's like he got wrapped up into the becoming in the payments business, right? Recreating the wheel, so to speak, because you solve it for one, and then you start solving it for two, and you think, I've got to build out everything. Anyway, those were a couple of the thoughts.
It gets uncomfortable, Craig, and that's not an isolated conversation. We have those a lot, and the political aspects of all of this kind of come into play, and hopefully some of the 200 plus attendees here are kind of smiling with me when I say this, but there's big bets made by organizations. There's a lot of resources that get allocated to understanding payments globally. And what happens is an organization that has made that bet for 5 years, for 10 years, has a well-established payments team. When you come across and ask those challenging questions and say those challenging things, I'm from the Midwest, so I'm pretty direct. So say those, it gets uncomfortable because it's like, well, wait, I have to undo some of what I've spent time doing for the last X years. And all of a sudden, well, okay, I want to do that, Greg, but how in the heck do I go back to the CEO, to the CFO, to the web treasurer and say, hey, yeah, just kidding. There's actually a better way to do this, and we can actually focus on our business to grow revenue for our shareholders in what we do. And so very uncomfortable conversation for sure. And so again, just trying to be a good partner and not, the greatest partners in the world challenge you, right? They challenge the thinking, and they push you to be better. That's another webinar, Craig. That's another one.
All right. We'll work out a time to schedule that. So we are on poll question 3, and this is a single question. Details matter to us for information reporting in the following way. So this is, hey, I'm getting information back in. Maybe I'm getting it back through Treasury. Top choice is yes, more information is better, and we want to be able to use it for AR, for reconciliation, for Treasury. Second is yes, more information is better, and we can use it, a little less granularity. And then no, we receive enough information for the foreseeable future. So this is just like, how important is information? Go ahead and select that. We have enough responses in the chat box. I'll ask Brian if you could post some of the there's some literature from Flywire. There's also the ability to connect with Strategic Treasurer and Flywire on LinkedIn. We'll post those in the chat box. We love it. Our marketing groups love it if you connect so that we can all stay connected more easily, more efficiently through some of those channels. So love it if you would do that. All right, so we have the answers. 93% like detail, 7% are pretty satisfied. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how it ask you to comment on that. So I'll just say, any comments? How about that?
I live by this one. The only thing worse than no data is bad data. And so I would argue that this is a mixed, maybe there's more of a detailed question, but yes, more information is better directionally, but it's actually, to me, it's the right information delivered at the right time in the right place is usable. Not just I want it all. And especially if businesses and executives make decisions based on information and data. And so if it is wrong or inaccurate or too much, it can lead to a lot of confusion. So all kinds of comments here, but I know we've got limited time.
Maybe maybe another webinar we could put on a calendar be no data, slow data, bad data.
Yes.
Inbound cross-border payments.
Yes.
Something like that. I'm glad we had that. So just see, it looks like the case study is populated there. Yeah, and I had asked Greg Levin to, we're talking about the complexity at a theoretical level, and then we're digging into it in some more details, and we're talking about how we simplify that process. And we've given a number of examples and ideas that tend to be a little more generalized. And so I want to go through a particular case study to put legs on that example. So thank you for sharing this case study.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this, a lot of our companies want to, better understand, again, a very complex ecosystem in the payment space. So I think that what this case study does is highlight the complexities. You've got a global company not based in the US that their billing cycles are different monthly, quarterly, annual. They're billing out of multiple entities with different settlement accounts. Holy moly, that's already complex. Not to mention, they have over 10,000 customers in 100 countries. Holy moly, still more complex. And I think, the devil's in the details on the third bullet point there on the situation is customers in 100 countries, 80% of the volume is in 24 countries. So back to what I was saying, if it's a customer in one of those 24 countries asking for a different payment method, a different way to pay, probably going to get addressed. But what about everyone else, right? It's kind of like I was at Coupa Software for a number of years. I'm sure many of you use Coupa, a great company. But it's all about kind of the indirect spend, right? That's what the Coupas, the Rebas of the world tackled and helped with. This is like the indirect customers, right? Is like direct customers, but how do we accommodate everyone else from a payment perspective? Massively challenging, massively hard to justify the ROI. And then, rapid international expansion. They had very time-consuming and manual reconciliation processes, and then simply were not able to accommodate the customer's local payment options. And so as a result, I think most folks associate payment projects with huge IT lift. Not true in this case, in many cases actually, where there's companies like Flywire that have the approach of embedded payments. It's kind of a buzzword here in the last couple of years, if not 18 months, but Flywire's been in embedded payments since we were founded before 2010. So we just want to exist wherever the organization wants us to exist. So we're able to go live very, very quickly, instantly expand local payment options to the global customer base in that time frame. And then, from an ROI perspective, 55 or 45% reduction in payment processing costs, and that tends to increase year over year. And then 70% time savings to just reconcile payments. So a big successful case study here with a massively complex organization.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for the thanks for walking us through that. Now we have a few things to touch on. I know there's room for Q&A, but so the final thoughts or the wrap up as we talked through complexity and how do we handle that. As we look through these three pillars, and Greg will talk to those in depth, but from a vision, what's the vision for being easy to do business with, easy to pay, and what are the vision supporting concepts, vision supporting statements that help you do that? As you're a payments professional or a seat professional, a treasury professional, how, what is your overall vision and plan for doing that? That's the first organizing concept that Greg will talk about. Second is understand where your complexity is, where the cost is, what prohibits you from being able to scale. And really addressing where you are on the complexity scale matters significantly, and being easy to do business with, easy to pay. And then from there, there's a lot of detailed steps that need to be taken to implement those actions, partnerships with tech firms, with banks, with changes to how you operate, to reduce that complexity, eliminate it, move towards a more simplified approach. So, macro, theory, vision, vision supporting items down to honing in and focusing on the particular areas that cause you the most problems, and moving to implement, the right types of solutions for that. I'll turn that back over to you, Greg. I know we've got questions that we'll want to talk about afterwards as well, but just wanted to give you the opportunity to build on these pillars.
Yeah, I think we spent 47 minutes together. I'm a big fan of thoughts that trigger certain one-liners for me. I don't know, maybe that's a new thing that I can put on my LinkedIn profile. But here's my thought whenever I hear all of this is, a quote that my dad kind of ingrained in me at a very young age, which was, if people knew the right thing to do, they'd already be doing it. And so, relating to anything, much less rolling out a global payments program, stop and pause. Have you ever actually done that before? If the answer is no, or kind of, you really need to surround yourself with partners, with internal or external partners that have done that journey before, or have kind of done that journey before. So there's a lot of guessing. There's a lot of misinformation in the international payment space. And gosh, it leads to a lot of churn, and a lot of what it results in is a lot of failed payment rollouts, actually. So I think, starting with that vision, surrounding yourself, and just making sure you know what you want to achieve before you get to assessing cost and complexity. There's a lot of cycles that we're in that's, hey, what's the price? It's like, well, what's the price of what? And it's like, oh, well, that's a good question. It's like, well, you're asking for a price, but you don't know what you're asking for. And so anyways, so yeah, people knew the right thing to do, they'd already be doing it, so to speak. Maybe that's a Midwest thing, but yeah, and then once you've really nailed that down, you've got complete vision across the organization, you've got complete alignment from the execs, then it's, hey, how do we actually do this? And one of the things that, do you know how your customers want to pay you? I would argue, I don't have a statistic, but I would argue the vast majority of companies actually don't know that. They've never really thought to even ask it. So yeah, a lot of thoughts here. Love this stuff. But because it's so complex, you've really got to have partners with you in rolling out a global payments program rather than vendors. And you can hopefully you can smell the difference right away.
Yeah, some good points. The question let's probe into that quote, especially if you're going to be putting it on LinkedIn. if people knew the right thing to do, they'd already be doing it. I think that's true in a lot of cases, and maybe it's even more true in the Midwest. I think that you gave an example earlier of like, hey, we've built up a group to do this, and it can be, we built up an IT group that does this. We built up a payments team to collect inbound payments. We've built up, a group that handles all of the collecting bank information to handle our cash positioning for treasury. once you've built that, even if there's a better way, it's like, hey, we're invested in it. Even if you know there's a better way, better formats, better partners, better banks, the investments in, tech debt, in organizational debt, in the commitment to what you've been doing before, that's hard to let go too. I think that's you know, I think we've probably all done that. I know I've done that. It's like, it's hard to let something go if you've invested in it a lot. And it's like, there's a new way to do it today. So that might be like one of the general truisms, but I think there's other examples too that like why do people resist moving to better tech sometimes? Just it's hard. They've got a lot of invested.
Yeah, there's a whole host of reasons and love the space, but simply put, let's be candid. Not all digital transformations actually result the way that the vision turned out to be. So I think there's a ton of noise in our space. I think, as industries develop, whether it's treasury or payments or finance, I think all of the vendors or partners' websites seemingly say the same thing. And so it's very, very difficult. And you gotta it makes it very challenging to say, no, I'm different. It's like, yeah, the last three people have also said that. So it's incredibly challenging, and just knowledge is power, especially in the international payment space, and surrounding yourself with great knowledgeable people that can guide and definitely understand, Craig, that at some point you got to quit aiming. You aim, right? You just got to execute and get something done. And so the hope is, people are the lifeblood of an organization. Surround yourself with great people and go to achieve a result together.
Yeah, that's a good one.
We've just done like 3 topics on webinars, so maybe we can start a series. I don't know, Craig.
Well, that would be good. Yeah, some really good points there. I was reading this morning. I was reading, not related to. It wasn't one of my business book readings. There was one sentence in this one paragraph in this one chapter this morning. It was for salespeople, people trying to convince others to move in a certain direction. It's hard to convince people to do something that they consider new, but not nearly as hard if people believe they've already tried something new and it didn't work, or a new approach. And I was thinking, that's pretty interesting. So maybe that's another webinar topic too, right?
Yeah, one of my mentors, and I don't think he's on this call, but he taught me really early on, gosh, a decade ago, I think, that, hey, Craig, even if you've done something before, even if you've been on the journey, treat everything as a hypothesis in a little experiment, and just prove it out before you make that, a full-on assumption. So in sales, we always say it's okay to make assumptions, just don't act on the assumption until you're sure. So anyways, I know I get long-winded. This is getting into be a fun little dialogue between yourself and I, but I know there's some questions that we've got to get through. So
yeah, no, that's good. We've moved efficiently, which is great. So if anybody has additional questions that we haven't answered, go ahead and type them in the Q&A box. I think we cleared out all of those. So if there's anything else, go ahead and drop them in. Brian, if you would post the links to connect to Flywire and Strategic Treasury on LinkedIn, that would be awesome. And we'll just give everybody a moment or two if they have a question they want to type in. Yeah, well, we'll still have time for those questions. I'll slide us to the closing slide that has a tech report that includes Flywire in it. It's free for download. Has contact information for both Greg and for my email. We're always happy to talk and connect. Yeah, we'll stay on for a minute. Greg, thanks so much. Everyone, thanks for taking time in your evening, late afternoon, morning, whatever time of day, or early morning, depending on where you're located. Thanks so much for spending this hour with us. We'll stay on for another few moments or so and then close it out. after we answer any questions that may pop up from here on in.
Cool. And I know that everybody loves time back, so if that means giving 4 minutes back, that's okay. Getting a lot of thank yous. So
we have a really active webinar chat channel. It's fun.
awesome. It's really awesome.
I guess we'll close things out. Greg, thank you so much for your time today. I think we came up with 4 other webinars, maybe a few podcasts worth of topics. Plus the your what do you call them? Your quotables, or however you phrase that. We could certainly probe on those.
Can't wait to check Slack here in a second with all my Flymates. We do have a pretty cool culture, an incredible culture at Flywire, and so check all the Slacks from the Flymates that were on. I think there was a few, and they're probably giving me a bunch of stuff about the number of analogies and quotes that I've cited today. So look forward to hearing
Awesome.
that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll stop the recording and get that information sent out to you. Brian, you have some final announcements. I'd love to hear those.
Indeed. Thank you everyone for joining us today. The CTP credits, today's webinar slides, and a recording of today's webinar will be sent to you within 5 business days. And for more on leveraging technology to manage inbound payments and other processes, be sure to download the Treasury Tech Analyst report by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.